This man chased a ghost for a year, until it showed him where the body was buried. Let's get into today's story. In the summer of 1921, a man named Ethan Holloway found himself living out a dream he had carried for most of his life. He had just purchased a farm in a quiet rural part of Ohio, and for the first time, the land, the animals, and the house were all his. One night, shortly before turning in, Ethan stepped outside with a lantern in one hand and a revolver secured at his side. He had made a habit of checking on his horses and cattle before bed. It gave him peace of mind and pride. As he crossed the open property, his eyes drifted across the farmhouse, the barn, and the old water well. That sat further out in the darkness. Standing there, he felt accomplished. This place represented everything he had worked for. The farm had come at a surprisingly low price. The previous owners hadn't hesitated to sell and seemed almost relieved to leave. Ethan never pressed them for a reason. Whatever their motivation was, it had worked in his favor. As he moved closer to the barn, the stillness of the night became unsettling. Without warning, a sharp sensation crept up his spine. His body reacted before his mind could explain it. The feeling that someone nearby was watching him. It didn't make sense. He lived alone. No neighbors close enough to wander onto his land unnoticed. Still, instinct took over. Ethan stopped, turned in a slow circle, and lifted the lantern, sweeping its dim glow across the field. Nothing moved. The darkness swallowed everything beyond a few feet. He considered the possibility of an animal, but the night was calm, and there were no signs of predators. Telling himself nerves were to blame, Ethan forced himself to continue. Inside the barn, he focused on his work. Feeding, checking stalls, making sure everything was secure. Gradually, the unease faded until it returned. As he finished up, that same heavy sensation settled over him again. He paused at the barn door, lantern held low, eyes fixed on the darkness outside. He couldn't see anything, but the fear lingered. The walk back to the farmhouse suddenly felt longer than it should have. Ethan took a breath, checked his weapon, and stepped out. He moved quickly, scanning the property as he went. About halfway home, something caught his attention far off to the side. He stopped. In the distance stood a figure. Raising his lantern, Ethan could just make out a pale, human-shaped silhouette standing unnaturally still near the water well. It appeared almost white against the darkness, facing directly toward him. He called out, demanding to know who was there. The figure didn't answer. Instead, it slowly turned and began moving away toward the well. Adrenaline took over. Ethan drew his gun and ran after it. As he closed the distance, the lantern swung wildly, shadows dancing across the ground. For only a moment, the figure slipped out of view. When Ethan reached the well, it was gone. No footsteps, no movement, nothing. Out of breath and shaken, Ethan shouted into the darkness, warning that he was armed and not afraid to defend himself. The night offered no response. Eventually, he retreated to the farmhouse, locked the door, and stayed awake until morning. By daylight, logic crept back in. Ethan convinced himself it must have been a trespasser, someone who panicked and fled. Whatever it was, he believed it wouldn't happen again. But it did. Night after night, usually around 9:30 p.m., Ethan saw the figure again. Always watching. Always at a distance. And every time he tried to approach, it moved silently toward the well and vanished. Once, he even fired his gun in its direction. The result was always the same. Over time, fear turned into grim acceptance. Ethan didn't consider himself superstitious, but no normal explanation fit. The figure never harmed him or the animals. It simply appeared, watched, and disappeared. Nearly a year later, on August 1st, 1922, something finally changed. That morning, his horses and cattle refused to drink from the well. They had relied on it daily without issue, but now they avoided it completely. Ethan tasted the water himself and noticed nothing unusual, yet the animal's behavior unsettled him. Deciding the well needed cleaning, Ethan began draining it. As the water level dropped, something emerged into view, something that should never have been there. At the bottom of the well lay human remains. The sheriff was called immediately. The discovery reopened an old mystery. Years earlier, the farm had belonged to a man named Walter Griggs, who employed a farmhand named Samuel Price. Samuel had vanished without explanation. With no close family, most assumed he had left town. One neighbor had suspected otherwise, claiming Walter and Samuel argued frequently over money. An investigation began, but before it could progress, Walter sold the farm and disappeared. With no evidence, the case went cold. Until Ethan drained the well. The remains were identified as Samuel's. An autopsy revealed he had died from blunt force trauma. When the body was recovered, investigators found a watch still strapped to his wrist. It had stopped at 9:35 p.m., the exact time Ethan had seen the figure appear night after night. After Samuel was given a proper burial, the figure never returned, and many believe the owners who sold the farm before Ethan had done so for the same reason. Because they too had been watching the dead refuse to rest. The farm is finally quiet now. The ghost never returned. But some secrets never truly rest. If this story gave you chills, smash that like button and subscribe to NextByte. Turn on the notification bell, because the darkest tales are just waiting to be uncovered.